Hey everyone, happy new year. It's Aidan here from Push Square, and now that we are officially in 2025, we want to know what's in store for PS5 this year. So without further ado, here are 20 of the most anticipated PS5 games of 2025. And these have actually been voted for by users over on pushsquare.com. I'm going to list the votes and the percentage of votes that each game received, just in a little lower third during the video, so keep an eye out for that. These RTS games are becoming more and more popular these days, so it's a good thing that the granddaddy of them all, Civilization, is back with its 7th entry in the series. Civilization basically charges you with molding your own empire, starting from a humble village to a city that lasts through the ages. Ages are actually a big new feature of this game. A single game of Civilization 7 will work through ages, which are specific periods of human advancement, and sort of play out like chapters. Decisions you make in one age carry over to the next, meaning once you've reached the end of your campaign, you've created a unique history and an empire that can stand the test of time. The masters of co-op are back with Split Fiction, a two-player action-adventure game that splits itself between fantasy and sci-fi worlds. With It Takes Two, Hazelight really perfected the co-op formula with a vibrant and diverse experience that was fun to play for both experienced gamers and newbies alike. I've yet to complete this game, but I played a lot of it with my wife. We have a lot of fun with it. Here, we have a game that looks just as joyously creative. In Split Fiction, there's this company that allows you to write stories and then experience them in a simulation. So our two protagonists are actually aspiring writers and somehow end up in the same simulation. One of them's a sci-fi writer and the other is a fantasy writer, and their worlds are colliding. They're going to have to escape the simulation, traversing both worlds. It's just so inventive, and just like Hazelight's previous games, only one of you actually needs to own the game, even if you're playing online. That's such a cool feature for a game that's focusing on co-op like this. If you're keen to highlight the zaniness of the Yakuza series to someone, point them in the direction of Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. You're playing as Goro Majima in this game. He's a man that has lost his memory and decides to reinvent himself as a pirate because why not? So of course you're embarking on an over-the-top adventure where you captain a ship and engage in combat both at sea and on land. The combat in this one looks mental, with your basic cutlass, boomerang, pistol and chain hook partnered up with summonable deities. Infinite Wealth had some bonkers looking combat, but Pirate Yakuza is taking it just that bit further. You can obviously take to the seas too in a customizable ship, battling it out with cannons and then actually boarding enemy ships too. And yeah, this is all set in the modern day too, so it's clearly just RGG Studios having a ton of fun with the series. The first game from Ghost Story Games, a team headed up by BioWare creator Ken Levine, is on its way. Judas is a first-person sci-fi game that is very, very clearly a spiritual successor to BioShock, with elemental abilities and wacky mechanical enemies on a spaceship. Said spaceship is essentially disintegrating, and you have to form a desperate escape plan. To get out though, you're going to need to form or break alliances with your biggest enemies. Now from early previews we know that Judas will incorporate procedurally generated roguelike aspects, however it is still tagged as a narrative experience, and your relationships will dictate gameplay aspects such as locked doors or new dangers. I think we really need to see some proper gameplay for this. At the time of recording, we've had snippets and a couple of story trailers, but still nothing that lays it all out. However, with Ken Levine helming this one, a lot of people, including myself, are very excited about it. Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra is a big budget single player narrative experience from Amy Hennig, former Uncharted writer. This one obviously is set in 1943, if you didn't guess, in the midst of the Second World War. In it, both Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, and Azuri, the Black Panther of the 40s, come at odds with each other as they find themselves in occupied France trying to tackle a Hydra plot. The two of them are going to have to form an uneasy alliance to take down their common enemy. Now let's start off with the first thing you notice, which is the visuals. 1943 looks insane from a cinematic perspective. We've yet to see gameplay, but there's been a lot of talk about essentially blending the cinematics with gameplay so as to create a seamless cinematic experience. Then of course you've got Amy Hennig in there too, so there's a lot seemingly riding on that name. Hennig is an experienced and very talented writer, and we have pretty damn interesting setting and concept with the power and the possibilities of the Marvel universe behind it all too. Now, I'm not so big on Marvel these days, but I'm a sucker for a big budget blockbuster narrative experience. Borderlands 4 is next up in the list, bringing with it a new planet, a new cast of characters, and a boatload of new weapons. If you're a fan of the series, you know what you're getting into here. Cel-shaded art style, humorous tone, although apparently slightly more serious this time around, and some first-person looter-shooter gameplay. All of the key features of the series seem to be very much alive in Borderlands 4, which dumps players in the deadly new world of Kairos, which is infected by the antagonistic Timekeeper and their synthetic army. Gearbox is hoping to make this fourth entry in the franchise the quintessential Borderlands experience with more loot than ever, free-form combat, large-scale boss battles, new and old characters, and plenty to explore with your co-op crew. Monster Hunter Wilds is in our 14th place in this list. Surprisingly a little low, I thought this one would be higher, but boy, is it a biggie. The series has really sprouted in popularity since the debut of Monster Hunter Worlds, with anticipation for Wilds really hitting an all-time high. The Push Square gang are actually a little cautious about getting too excited for this after the middling beta. Obviously we're all hoping that it's smooth sailing come launch, but it doesn't hurt to be a little skeptical sometimes. Regardless though, Monster Hunter Wilds is shaping up to be an enormous game with new monsters, new environmental mechanics, new weapons, all wrapped up in a fun co-op experience. Every year, the paintress paints a number, and everyone that age dies. It's a bold concept from the upcoming RPG Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This AAA adventure blends turn-based combat with top-of-the-line visuals and a star-studded cast including Andy Serkis, Ben Starr, and Charlie Cox. This is really trying to be an evolution of the JRPG with a Belle Epoque France-inspired world. I'm just gonna move on from that and pretend I pronounced it right. But we have 6 upgradable and customizable characters, a thrilling and emotional storyline, and a hybrid combat mix of turn-based combat and real-time parries and dodges. This to me feels like a JRPG style of game trying to go for the mainstream, and I'm kinda here for it. One of the earliest releases of 2025, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, is the enormous medieval RPG that's all about immersing players in an engrossing and pretty damn realistic world. This isn't medieval fantasy, which I actually find quite refreshing in a way, despite really liking fantasy, but with the cult following that the first game got, I can't wait to see what Warhorse Studios cooks up. With over 5 hours of cinematics and branching narrative choices, this is an extremely ambitious affair, and one surrounded by a diverse open world with lush forests and dense towns where you explore taverns, bathhouses and castles. This game has kinda slipped me by for the most part, but the more I read into it, the more interested I become, so I'll be keeping an eye out for this one. From the team behind Fallout New Vegas, The Outer Worlds 2 is a satirical sci-fi RPG that's double the size of the first game, ushering players into a new star system, which of course comes with new environments, weapons, and plenty of new story content. A big focus of the last game were the many companions you could come across, and with the new setting, we're getting a clean slate when it comes to all the zany characters we may encounter. Now, doubling the size was something I don't typically like the sound of, but the first game actually isn't too big, taking around 20 hours to mainline its campaign, which is a fair amount, but not so much for quite a lot of RPGs like this, so it will be cool to see how Obsidian expands things with this sequel, with more stories, side content, and hopefully some nice sweet gameplay changes too. Cracking the top 10, we have Elden Ring Nightreign. It's one of my most anticipated games of 2025 because it's basically Elden Ring but made for 3-player co-op. As someone that played a large majority of Elden Ring with my friends, you had to endure the tedious summoning process every time someone died or we beat a boss. The idea of a FromSoft experience that's actually built for co-op is really exciting. Also from the standpoint that FromSoft has never really made a game like this, that's exciting for me. You play either in solo or trios, no duos here, but you have 8 character types to choose from with different builds and abilities, and then you have to make split-second decisions as the map gradually gets smaller. Now, I don't think this is Battle Royale. It certainly has elements that look like it, but regardless, if it's more Elden Ring but co-op, that's a win for me. Crimson Desert is an open world action adventure and undoubtedly one of the biggest games on this list. I mean, like, physically, this game's massive. Set in the continent of Pywell, it's all very, the world's in trouble, everyone is struggling for power, you must save everyone from catastrophe. Now, you play as a member of the Greymanes, fighting for a peace that is being threatened by the Black Bears. So this mighty war is spreading across Pywell, and you've got to love just a black and white good and evil type scenario. I think we've all heard stuff like this before, but taking a look at the gameplay for Crimson Desert is where things start to perk up. There's a clear emphasis on combat and scale. The gameplay is very nippy, with the main dude pulling off all sorts of flashy attacks and rolls and jumps and all sorts, but you'll constantly be reminded of just how massive this world is. Honestly, the biggest games that it reminded me of when watching it was Dragon's Dogma 2 and The Witcher 3, which is quite a compliment, I would say. Assassin's Creed Shadows is the Assassin's Creed game that every fan of the series has been begging for over a decade. With the RPGification of the series, with the Egyptian origins, the Greek Odyssey, and the Viking Valhalla, Shadows is taking to the Sengoku period Japan, and with the series' affinity for immersive sandboxes with impressive levels of detail, I cannot wait to explore this setting. Returning from Syndicate, we will once again have 2 protagonists in Shadows in the form of the bulky samurai Yasuke and the stealthy shinobi Naoe. Each will have vastly different playstyles and character-specific missions too. Now, my biggest issue with these games is honestly that they're so goddamn big, and Shadows is supposedly about the same size as Origins, which is the smallest of the 3 RPG entries, but this kind of feels like a big deal for the franchise, so I'm very on board for it. The Doom series has seen a brilliant revival since its 2016 reboot with Doom and Doom Eternal, and now we have the 3rd entry in this revamped series, which acts as a prequel to the first, but a sequel to the original game. I'm not a Doom lore expert here, but Doom the Dark Ages has a darker, more medieval vibe to it, with the Doom guy rocking a shield with razor edges, and of course a host of gnarly weaponry, like one that chows up skulls? I mean, look at that, that's crazy. The big change with the Dark Ages is that it's supposedly a much more boots on the ground experience, after Doom Eternal in particular pivoted towards vertical combat with jump pads, grapple hooks and posts to swing from. So it's trying to hark back to the OG days of Doom. Honestly, this is one of those solid series where I don't really care what the selling point of it is, although I do like the aesthetic of this one. I just want more Doom. I'm honestly happy with that alone, so Doom the Dark Ages, bring it on. When you're remaking games from a famous franchise, why not start with the 3rd entry in the series? That's clearly what Konami were thinking when it greenlit Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, which is a from the ground up remake of this 2004 classic. Now, I'm not gonna lie, my only experience with this franchise is Metal Gear Solid The Phantom Pain, so a remake of Snake Eater is certainly something I'd be keen to check out, to experience more of the Kojima weirdness. Now, speaking of Kojima, I think everyone wants to know whether this game will have lost that Kojima soul, and I do think it's a valid concern. Graphically, at least, it looks unreal, and really if we just have as smooth a third-person experience as MGS5, we're cooking in that regard. But this is a big game for a lot of people, and one we're waiting with bated breath for that release date. The Xbox crowd has already got their mitts on this one, but it's time for PS5 to get go of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Developed by Machine Games, the team behind the Wolfenstein series, this is a classic indie romp with Harrison Ford's likeness, but Troy Baker stepping in for some eerily similar vocal work. Now, I'm still not sure about the whole first person thing. I always felt like an indie game should be a third person game, but I can't deny that I love both a good action adventure game and I love the Wolfenstein games, so if Machine Games are involved, With a game like this, you know you're in for a good time. It also feels kinda like a full circle moment with Indiana Jones inspiring Tomb Raider inspiring Uncharted. Now here we are with a fully fledged Indiana Jones video game. As a massive fan of Mafia 2, I am very excited for a new Mafia game in 2025. I wasn't so hot on Mafia 3, so here's hoping the old country is a return to the series' roots, and it looks set to be that from what we've seen so far. With its early 1900s Sicily setting, we're going back to like old school gangster stuff with family dramas, initiations, and from the trailer what looks like a real focus on history both in its setting and culture. The trailer, which is an in-game cinematic, looks so good with an almost filmic look to it. I know I'm not the only person that saw this and thought of Michael Corleone when he flees to Sicily in the first Godfather movie. Now these tales are usually filled with tragedy and heartbreak, and I'm personally there for all of that grief when it launches in the summer of 2025. I'm kinda surprised to see this one so high, but it's taken the number 4 spot. We're into the top 3 now with Death Stranding 2 on the beach. Having just completed Death Stranding over the Christmas holidays, I'm feeling very lucky and very excited for another game in 2025. Kojima just seems to be going full tilt with this one, which is ditching its barren USA landscapes for a more diverse looking Mexico where Sam must once again connect the world. I blow really hot and cold with the narrative of Death Stranding. I absolutely love the gameplay loop and traversing realistic environments and physically carrying your tools to make it to your destination and making so many roads and zip lines. So I'm really hoping for more of that, and it evolves and we have new mechanics, and it looks like we're getting some of that from what we've seen in the trailers so far. The story seems even weirder than before, so if that's for you, good. Hopefully I like this one a little bit better. Okay, at the number 2 spot we have more than double the votes from Death Stranding 2, and that is Ghost of Yotei. Sucker Punch finally unveiled its follow-up to the fantastic Ghost of Tsushima, and to our surprise it ditches the titular island along with its protagonist Jin to venture to a new Japanese setting of Yotei, now known as Hokkaido, and a 300-year time jump is thrown in there as well. I was always a little skeptical as to how you follow up a game like Tsushima when the island can't really change too much, and Jin's story wrapped up quite nicely in my opinion. Making that switch to an anthology series is incredibly exciting though, because not only does it let us mix up the mechanics with new weapons and different locations, narratively it lets us open up to a whole new realm of possibilities that extend beyond Yotei itself. I cannot wait to see what Sucker Punch does with this open world samurai adventure. There was no world in which this wasn't number 1, although surprisingly very close to Ghost of Yotei with just 11 points of a difference. But Grand Theft Auto 6 almost feels like Judgment Day for gamers. The hype truly feels insurmountable. There will be no bigger game in 2025. Hell, will there even be a bigger game in the 20s? Gamers are frothing out of their mouth for more info in this game. Even non-gamers are aware of it. And I bet money on the whole games are bad debate starting up again from news networks. You know it's a big deal when the news networks start talking shit about it all. After crafting up such a well-realised world in Red Dead Redemption 2, I cannot wait to see how meticulously detailed this new setting is. Rockstar is the best developer in the world when it comes to realising its setting. I mean, the fact that people still play GTA 5 over a decade later is truly a testament to that. So with GTA 6 we have the Florida Keys inspired setting, what looks like 2 protagonists with a Bonnie and Clyde styled dynamic, and easily the most detailed setting Rockstar has ever cooked up. That's all we really have to go on, but Rockstar just doesn't really miss, so you've got to assume that this is a lock-in. Those are 20 of the most anticipated PS5 games according to the users over on pushsquare.com. Thank you to everyone that took part in the voting. It certainly is actually a more dynamic list than I thought it was going to be. Couple of omissions, couple of ones higher or lower than I thought they were going to be. Exciting stuff. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, remember to leave a like, leave a comment about your most anticipated games, and even better, subscribe to the channel for more PlayStation video content just like this. Anyway, thank you as always for watching. I've been Aaron, and this has been Push Square.